All right, I clicked it.
Hey everyone, I'm Chart Man Dan of the Chart Guys checking in here with Joey, and we are going to peek in at the cryptocurrency space. We're kind of winging it here as far as our setup, so bear with us while we deal with the screen sharing and all that. But we're going to take a look at Bitcoin, altcoins, the crypto stocks, which are potentially giving us some early indications, which they've done many times over the last couple of months. And we'll talk about the dollar as well. Joey doesn't like the dollar a whole lot, but I find it fairly useful when checking out on Bitcoin. So, how you doing, Joey?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. A little hectic getting it set up, switching from Slack to Zoom and this and that. So if our audio's all jacked up or anything, let us know in the comments. But I think we got it pretty decent.
So, as those of you know, Joey's been taking over the live stream, the regular live streams for crypto here to start the year. I've been focusing a bit more on the cannabis sector and opportunities there to start the year, but definitely still keeping an eye on the cryptocurrency sector. And we're going to talk about Link and the relative strength that we've been seeing there. But heading on over to the charts to start with Bitcoin. So, first things first, again, we can see Link, relative strength, which has been standing out over the last week. And Bitcoin right now, the big question is, can we confirm the daily uptrend? Because we had our big bounce off the lows, we had the daily higher low, and now we're just in a little bit of an equilibrium. And so if this breaks bear, we'll say, all right, it was a nice bounce, but we never confirmed a daily uptrend. And that will be the weekly lower high likely being set. And I assume Joey's been saying the same thing that I've been saying, whereas the weekly lower high is the most likely scenario with the current size of this retracement on the pullback. And the only way that we would go to a higher high from here would be with very significant bull volume, which obviously we haven't been seeing. Just looking at Coinbase on the daily chart, we can see volume is actually declining, and declining volume is generally associated with an equilibrium and a tightening pattern. Is that in line with what you've been seeing, Joey, on the weekly?
Yeah, that's pretty much the what we've been talking about. The obvious potential 6 month lower high. Bigger picture, and then this weekly bounce also looking for a lower high, and we'll be watching retracement size, and that'll be the telling element to it. And this is kind of, for me, one of those spots where it can kind of pay to have some imagination and potentially protect yourself, because like we know that if a 6 month lower high is going to shape up, it's going to start with a weekly downtrend somewhere. And if you're a long-term bull and you've got these bull positions, what type of risk do you have right now to potentially hedge yourself in this daily EQ in case it is a weekly lower high that then does lead to a weekly downtrend? Again, there's not like glaring signs that that's the most likely scenario, but that's just a big thing in trading, using your imagination a little bit, looking a few steps ahead. And that's kind of what I would be watching out for if I did have big bull positions, just because like a few percent you can hedge yourself off. And if we continue on up, then you stop out, you're all good. If we go down, then you've neutralized your position up at 43K after a 200% move.
And so one of the things that, the way what's happening on this chart in terms of what are traders thinking, both bulls and bears. I like to look at charts from both angles. And essentially it's right now, this weekly bounce is the second chance for sellers, meaning for those people that thought, ETF, we're going to keep running. It's not a sell the news event. They got a bit of an awakening saying, oh, well, darn, I should have sold in the upper 40,000s. We just pulled back 20% plus. And now that we get this bounce, it's almost like a second chance to take some off and to take some risk off. And so the big question is, as Joey mentioned, does this shape up a weekly downtrend? There's only three things that happen from here. We either V-shape to the higher high, which will not happen without very notable volume. The most likely scenario is a lower high and tightening range through most of February. And of course, the third scenario would be bearish if we set the lower high, drop down and break the low of 38.5 thousand and start monthly consolidation. And one of the major factors today with the weakness, in my opinion, was the stock market weakness. We could see here, what time of day is this? This is, the stock market is opening right about here on Bitcoin, and then we just dump for 90 minutes straight. And if you look at the NASDAQ just dumped all open, and it V-shaped, recovery pretty significantly. So I would say, Bitcoin was dragged down with the NASDAQ at that same point in time. It's bouncing, but its bounce is much weaker at this point. So we just got a little tightening range. We're going to look for an hourly. Actually, I like the 4-hour right now, where anything above the low of yesterday is a 4-hour higher low, but really it's just a tightening 12-hour range. And so the support I care the most about is 42.2. Bulls are just fine at 42.2 thousand is holding. And of course, there's a resistance zone around 43.7, 43.8, where we've topped out a few times. So we're just churning and battling within this range. And as far as I'm concerned, we can absolutely break this range either direction. I don't have a significant edge when I look at just this sideways range, but knowing the bigger picture where a weekly lower high is the most likely scenario, that definitely, leaves me open to the possibility that it's a bear break to set that weekly lower high.
I think it is worth noting too that on the Binance chart, we actually did break the first level in the daily EQ. Coinbase has that scam wick in there. So, it's only marginal, but obviously not what bulls would want to see. If you were seeing full on confidence, you break that level, you're not getting smacked back down hard. Because if we look back to the morning, that was a very aggressive smackdown right after that break. So
yeah, what Joey's talking about here on the chart is that a couple of these other exchanges, aside from Coinbase, did break bull, and that's more bearish. If you break a tightening range bull just barely and then drop right back down, that's more bearish than if you're in an equilibrium and you just set the lower high, because in general, you would want to see that break lead to follow through, as opposed to the equilibrium lower high saying, all right, that makes sense, we're just tightening up. So that is important to note. So thanks for pointing that out.
yeah.
That just adds, in terms of percentage, that just adds a few more percentage points on the bear side of things in terms of the tightening range that we're currently in. But still hanging on for now and looking for a break probably tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, then certainly on Wednesday. Another thing I'm keeping an eye on are these crypto stocks, because as we know, just looking at MARA, so MARA topped out before Bitcoin. Back here, euphoria top. It bottomed out days before Bitcoin. And now we just broke the low of last week, and it's a potential weekly bear flag in a lot of these crypto stocks. Our weekly lower high is already set here. The bounce retracement way weaker than what Bitcoin has put together. We look at Riot, weekly lower high set, and Coin actually confirmed the bear flag today, although no follow through right now. Coin is battling the previous resistance zone, now support 114 to 116. So just looking at these three names, I would say Coin is the weakest. Riot and MARA have pretty much been doing the same thing. If you look at MARA divided by Riot, we can see on the daily chart, sideways means not a whole lot of difference between the two. But I can say that these crypto stocks are weaker than Bitcoin currently is. Some of that has to do with, IWM having pulled back over the last week, and obviously the other factors to do with the market. But it definitely stands out to me. Again, just a little piece of the puzzle. I look at the dollar and I factor that in a small amount. I look at these crypto stocks and I factor it in a small amount, and they are definitely showing weakness. And again, you look at the NASDAQ bounce, V-shape, and you look at MARA's bounce, and it's mimicking Bitcoin right now with its weaker bounce. Do you factor these in at all in your analysis, Joey?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you factor in the crypto stocks in your analysis at all?
Yeah, definitely looking for clues, just because of the history that you mentioned, that they're often leading the way. I view it similar to how we view miners in the metal space, or even just silver in the metal space, that you've got your higher risk assets, and they, everything tends to just follow the leader around charts and whatnot. So
one little puzzle piece in the bull column for me is the fact that Bitcoin is holding well while the dollar has done nothing but go up over the last 6 weeks. And again, just very generally speaking, if you look at the period where the dollar was strong, July to October, and you compare that to Bitcoin, what was Bitcoin doing July to October? It was doing this. So definitely not much going on for the bulls. And then then the dollar topped out in October. Bitcoin takes off. We then top out to start the year. Obviously, that was ETF related mostly, but we are following to a certain degree. The dollar bottoms out a week or week and a half before Bitcoin. Generally speaking, Bitcoin bulls want to see the dollar weak. And right now we're seeing a strong dollar. And so this is a period of consolidation. Pretty much every period of consolidation that Bitcoin has seen over the last year and a half has been when the dollar was its strongest. And so that's what's going on right now. So if you are a Bitcoin bull, what you want to see is the dollar set. Right now it's just a monthly equilibrium, low, high, higher, low. You want to see the dollar set this monthly lower high if this sideways Bitcoin consolidation on the weekly chart is going to increase probabilities of breaking bull. So again, just something to be keeping an eye on. I'm never making a trade based on what the dollar is doing, but as I mentioned, it's just a little bit of analysis where maybe I factor it in as 10% of my decision making or things like that. Why don't you like the dollar, Joey?
That's a great question, Dan. The main thing for me is that the correlation, the inverse correlation between the dollar, crypto, equities, commodities, there's no denying that in a broader sense, it's there, but day to day, it is not there all that often. I'd say 50% at best. And I just choose not to give the mental bandwidth to say, like, all right, I'm going to check in with the dollar and evaluate, is the dollar corroborating this story or against this story? And just like a good example would be the last 5 weeks in the broad market, we've been going up and everything, but the dollar has also been going up. And for me, ultimately, it was just too much information, give me too much to think about. And then would lead to things like being a cautious bull on this broad market move up because we have a strong dollar as well. So it was ultimately just knocking it out of my regular analysis. I mean, I still look at what the dollar's doing. I'm going to be very interested in the direction the monthly EQ breaks, but certainly intraday, too inconsistent for me, and even day to day, too inconsistent for me. And like this Bitcoin bounce, I mean, we've been bouncing for a couple weeks right now while the dollar's still been going up. And, if you were worried about the dollar, then you didn't get the weekly 12 EMA buy that we had been talking about for a good while. So just personal choice to not kind of like, there's so much information that is in the markets. And if we try to gobble it all up, that just makes our job more difficult parsing through it. So, yeah.
Makes sense. I'll allow it. So ETH. So we're grinding weekly EMA 12. We can make the simple statement bulls are fine as long as weekly EMA 12 is support, but very clearly we're weaker than Bitcoin on this move. And, it's just real tight. What does this tell us? We know ETH volatility is coming pretty soon here because we are on our second weekly inside bar in a row. The daily chart just chopping sideways over the last week. And the most important factor, again, haven't been watching your live streams, but I know you're talking about it, where ETH BTC, we just keep getting these big moves, but we are not getting any confirmed trend changes. So big move, give it back, slow fade, big move, no daily uptrend. And then most recently, monster move off the low, never confirmed a simple daily uptrend with a higher low and higher high. And so now we just fade and give it back for weeks. And so we're still going to anticipate a weekly higher low on ETH BTC, but it's just not the conviction, not the confidence that the bulls want to see to outperform Bitcoin. So keep an eye out for that weekly higher low. But again, there's a lot of work that has to be done for ETH to start standing out significantly comparative to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and this ETH BTC chart, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about the importance of having, a bit of an imagination in trading and then respecting what is your risk to reward on that. Because back up at the highs we were talking about, obviously ETH is the name to be in right now, but when we zoom out to the monthly, we're testing the monthly 12 EMA on freshly bear crossed EMAs. So what would it take for that to be the extent of the pump? And just kind of laying out the groundwork. We didn't have to predict and put all our chips in to say this is where ETH weakness starts to come in, but just had to imagine it a little bit, then lay out the roadmap for what would it look like if this was happening. And really it was daily 12 EMA being the, if daily 12 EMA held, everything was fine. And, obviously at this point down significantly after the failed daily 12 EMA test.
So if we're going to see any kind of ground being gained here at this point, it just has to be the weekly uptrend. We have to break where we came from and get to the strongest that ETH has been relative to Bitcoin in a couple of months. Otherwise, I wouldn't be surprised to see this, this wide range tighten up for, if Bitcoin's going to tighten up on the weekly through a good bit of February, then expecting this chart will likely tighten up a good bit through February as well. Let's now look at Link, clearly the lead bull recently. And again, tally, bull and bear column, a tally in the bull column for crypto is the fact that Link has already hit weekly higher highs. We had a monthly bull flag that has confirmed and just recovering from its own sideways consolidation, a month, 5 or 6 weeks of consolidation and breaking out to fresh highs. And so, I'm seeing on my timeline on Twitter way more posts about Link fundamentals now that it's leading and all the things going on there. But just a stair step move, daily high or low every single day, 11 days in a row. And going to be keeping an eye for back burners to be back on the table where we are going to look for, first, let's see what the 4-hour looks like. So we already had clear 4-hour consolidation, double bottom at 1750 that bulls defended into continuation. So I would say at this point, we're going to look for first hourly oversold whenever we get there to be looking for a daily higher low. We got a lot of space to form a daily higher low. Daily EMA 12 will be coming up into play. So in terms of buying consolidation, that is the time frame that I would be watching at this point. But in the moment, bulls are holding on just fine, trying to battle and hold hourly EMA 12 right now. As far as longer term levels, there's not a ton nearby. Once we cleared 1832, 1958 was a little level. Guess you could say we're still chopping around there. But if we can clear 1958 more convincingly, there's very little until we're looking up into the mid to upper 20s. So that's a big positive, but it's only one name, right? We got to see, ideally, bulls want to see Sol get some continuation. They want to see a handful of these more popular altcoins make their way up. Right now, Sol's doing the same thing as Bitcoin, weekly higher low set right off EMA 12, keeping an eye out for the lower high. Not going to be surprised if we tighten up within this range through most of February. And are there any altcoins, Joey, that you're keeping an eye on?
I'm honestly looking more for weekly lower highs. My bull plays were RNDR and Sol USD off those weekly 12 EMAs are my primary bull scouts. But I've got a list here that I'm looking for weekly lower highs on of Matic, AXS, Uni, Theta, ETC, AAVE, really any altcoin that lost that weekly 12 EMA on the pullback last month is going to be looking for a weekly lower high. And the odds of that weekly lower high is a lot higher on something like Matic than it is on something like Solana. So I'm just looking bearish on those weaker names at this point, and sticking with Link as a bull. Link BTC is just now confirming the monthly bull flag along with Link USD, and we've got another big level coming on up for kind of this stretched out monthly inverse head and shoulders. So that's what Link bulls really want to get up and over to get to the highest relative strength since 2021. So
yeah, that is a very key level there. And just a side note, a little tangent before we check out some of those coins that you just mentioned. In the cannabis sector that I'm covering more now these days, I've been using these comparative charts that I learned in crypto 2017 and applying it to these other sectors. And just here's an example, individual name, TCNNF divided by its ETF, the major ETF. And it was the same thing where I was watching this longer term level and saying, all right, we're weaker than the ETF, but if we get over this zone, it's going to be the strongest that we've been in, 7+ months. And we broke that relative strength resistance on January 22nd. And you can see TCNNF has just gone straight up And, from January 22nd, when that relative strength level broke, we ended up going up another 60% over the next week and a half. So really nice to be able to apply the same concepts across multiple different markets. Let's go to RNDR, as you mentioned. Again, anything that's holding weekly EMA 12, that's your analysis longer term from a swing perspective. If it's holding weekly EMA 12 as it has again and again and again, the bulls don't have anything to worry about. They are in complete control. And so I do like that just as a general guide. Look bullish on the names holding weekly EMA 12 and look bearish on the names that are losing weekly EMA 12. You can see Matic looks very different, as you mentioned. A lot of space for that weekly lower high. Also, the fact that Matic dropped to the lowest price that we've seen in 3 months. So
It's also
clearly,
got like a monthly equilibrium in there as well. So you've got your larger time frame corroboration of looking for that monthly lower high. So just got to get the weekly downtrend to get that set more confidently. And then Matic BTC is teetering on a key long-term support. We've broken it a little bit without follow through, but if you look at like the monthly or quarterly and zoom way out, there's a lot of air underneath there. If that were to bust, so yeah, I'd say Matic is my top bear scout at this point.
ICP, again, I'm just going to go down the list here real quick. Holding weekly MA 12, tightening range, no red flags. APT is battling to hold it as well. Binance still easily holding it. So I would suggest going down, your list of names, you, the viewer, that are watching, and just going through to find, just who's holding weekly MA 12 and who's losing it. You could just make a list next to your computer and put 5 names holding it, 5 names losing it, and have those names directionally be what you are focusing on. Because as Joey mentioned, why I love equilibriums are, number one, it's the most common pattern in markets. After significant volatility in both directions, you look for tightening ranges. But number two, when you anticipate that you're going to be looking to tighten up, you can position a lot easier. If a weekly lower high is the most likely scenario, I'm either going to exit some of my longs that I would have wanted to before the big drop, or grab some shorts for a hedge to protect. And I highly suggest getting familiar with these equilibriums and using those. Just as an example, today NVDA has been all bull, but we had a little tightening 15-minute range, and there was just a little play. Let's say I'm long, and oh man, we dropped big. I should have taken more profit. Here's my second chance, anticipating that lower high, and now it's just a tightening range. It's not your standard equilibrium, but it's definitely a sideways 15-minute range. And we're going to see a volatility spike here in NVDA probably before the end of the day, because we can't get much tighter than where we stand right now. So just a note to get really, if you ask me what is the number one pattern I should focus on in trading, it's equilibriums, just because of how often they show up, how they can be utilized just as easily as a bull or a bear, trading within them. And then, of course, once they break, looking at names like CCJ and uranium, we had the forever monthly equilibrium. It broke bull, and it did not look back, just straight up from there. Find those longer term tightening patterns and watch for their breaks, because they generally have high probability of follow through. All right, that's all we're going to look at for now. Anything else you want to mention, Joey?
I want to ask you what your thoughts on Bitcoin dominance are right now.
Bitcoin dominance. So again, same thing. We're scouting a weekly lower high. Monthly is a clear uptrend. So I would say clearly, so we're bouncing. On this bounce, Bitcoin's leading the way. So this is telling me the majority of altcoins are lagging behind Bitcoin over the past couple of weeks on the bounce, and anticipating, let's see, if we were to set a weekly lower high in the dominance, when Bitcoin sets a weekly lower high, that would mean that Bitcoin is leading the pullback as well. Honestly, whenever I see the dominance tightening up, for me, it's not really useful. I like when the dominance is giving us very strong trends, whether it's clearly Bitcoin as the major focus or clearly altcoins. And so right now we're kind of chopping around, and this is where I use the dominance much less in my decision making. Clearly, there's a bunch of altcoins weaker on this bounce right now. If we set a weekly lower high on Bitcoin, a bunch of these altcoins will break support before Bitcoin does. That can potentially be an early heads up if you watch some of these weaker names and they're breaking support before Bitcoin. But again, right now, I would pull up a dominance chart and then close it out and not really look at it much with this current setup.
Cool. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing it as well. Really, the big thing that I'll be looking to see is when it, or if we get a Bitcoin dominance weekly lower high, is that alts playing catch up, and like the handful of names that have like daily falling wedges, like XRP, I think FET maybe was another one. What were some of these names? AXS, FET, XRP got these daily falling wedges. Do getting this next round of alts to break bull, does that bring dominance down? And that's obviously what Bitcoin bulls want to see, continued rotation and whatnot. Or, like you said, does dominance top out with a Bitcoin weekly lower high and then have us come down? Because most of 2023, the dominance chart has kind of mirrored the Bitcoin chart as it's been leading the way. And then, like in October or so, we got rotation into alts, and then we had dominance pulling back while the space as a whole was still going up and alts were leading. And I'm just kind of continuing to evaluate which version of dominance up, dominance down do we get, because obviously bulls want to see the rotation. They don't want to see Big Daddy BTC leading the way down, because that would then just increase the odds of a 6-month lower high or something like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned XRP because I forgot to mention it, but I do like this falling wedge. Oftentimes you'll see a big mama falling wedge and then a baby with inside it. And so this is the bigger picture one. And then sometimes I'll just go in and draw this smaller one as well. And so I can zoom in and say, all right, over the last month, this is a clear tightening range that's looking to break. And then I would just, keep in mind that it's possible this breaks bull, but then the longer term one we reject and continue tightening up within it. But again, another name where we know volatility is coming here. It's an equilibrium that's been tightening up over a week. We had, what was it? I'm not even following the headlines, but there was a hack and 110 million or something, I think. And had to do with Ripple, not XRP, I believe. Don't quote me on any of these fundamentals, but that led to a bear break of 50 cents with no follow through. And watching to see if that bear break with no follow through shows us that the bears are tired and the bulls take over a bit here. So if this pattern is going to play out, the bulls definitely want to set this daily higher low and see a break of 527 to confirm the daily uptrend and break out at least of the baby falling wedge before we look at the bigger picture one. XRP BTC, same deal. Need that daily uptrend. And it's been nothing but downside since those court cases. So bulls hoping for some short-term relief. But got to see both the US dollar and the BTC pairing. Both pairings got to break bull on this daily chart. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And nice to see you all in the crypto space. It's been a while. Thanks, Joey.
If y'all want Dan to come back, hit the like button. We got 58 likes and 180 viewers.
That's whack.
Thanks for tuning in, though. That's all we got.
All right. Do good things.